Greetings and welcome to episode 11 of XEP's Creator Talk. If you are supporting on Patreon, thank you immensely. You're keeping the lights on and the content coming. If you are watching later on YouTube when this goes public to all, thank you for watching XEP. And please consider supporting us over at patreon.com/the Xbox Expansion Pass, as we would love to have you there. Today for Creator Talk, I'm joined by one MissDeusGeek, Southeast Asian gaming influencer from Australia and New Zealand. Diana is a member of Xbox's Hall of Fame and runs a multi-platform brand called Attack on Geek, which she founded in 2015. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. You have a really cool career, and I think a lot of people know your work from a lot of the social media content that you create and put out there. And that's kind of the crux of this show, is discussing with creators their process, how they came to be, the do's and don'ts. When did you start content creation?
I think this time in 2015, so about 8 years ago now.
8 years ago now. That would imply that you created Attack on Geek at that time?
Yeah, Attack on Geek was basically the first foray into all of this.
If it was the first foray into all of this, you've certainly grown that to be something quite successful, because 8 years later, I can go to that website, see a number of different types of things, from game reviews to movie content. That's certainly a big undertaking. Was that your vision when you first started?
No, not at all. I didn't have a vision, to be very honest, when I first started. The whole reason I got into it in the first place was I'd always been a writer. I'd love just voicing my opinions through the written form. And I just absolutely hated the Fantastic Four reboot that came out in 2015. And people around me at the time weren't nerds. I was very much in a very different space where my friends were interested in none of the things that I was interested in terms of
Mhm.
pop culture and gaming and geek culture. So I thought, okay, well, I've been reading a lot of blogs. I know how simple it is. I used to run a anti-bullying blog, so I
Mhm.
knew how to kind of set all that up. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to voice my opinions in the form of a review on a website called Attack
Mhm.
on Geek, or back then it was called The Vanguard because I couldn't come up with a better name.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it kind of just went from there, really. I really enjoyed writing the review, and people started interacting with it. I met my husband back then as well. So at that point in time, I was exposed to gaming as well. And so just kind of went from there. And somehow, I guess, through people just coming on board and enjoying the content I was creating, it just became this full blown website that has now spanned 8 years.
8 years, a website that spans film, TV, gaming, uh, and the way you worded that a moment ago would suggest that you were not a gamer prior to meeting your partner.
I was, but not as much as I am now, or rather, I was. It's been an interesting kind of flow.
Mm-hmm.
I've always played games. I've played games since I was like 3, I think, with the original Doom,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more of a as and when something uh, intrigues me, or I see something that I think looks cool and I want to play it. We never really had a lot of consoles and things growing up. We had knockoff consoles in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
So half the time, I don't even know if what I was playing was a real game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after I met my partner and now husband, that was when I was introduced to online gaming. I never
Mm-hmm.
used to play multiplayer games before that. Coming from Asia and very strict parents, it was, stranger danger, don't talk to people online, all of that sort of thing. So after meeting him is when I essentially was exposed to the Xbox community and communities online. And that's essentially how I kind of got into more, um, I guess, long term everyday kind of gaming,
Mm-hmm.
which after a while, with everything that I've done now, it's become a kind of thing where I really wish I could game as much as I used to, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been a bit harder with juggling so many different things these days.
Oh, so okay, that begs several questions, but
Mm.
I want to touch on. You mentioned being in Malaysia. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Malaysia and then moved to New Zealand when I was 12, turning 13.
Gotcha. That's fascinating to me because you met your now husband 8 years ago. Prior to that, you weren't exposed to many games, whereas now across your various social media platforms, people are watching you unbox the latest Starfield or the Spider-Man 2 PlayStation, which is just gorgeous. That's just such a far jump, at least in my mind. Do you see it that way?
I think, it's having conversations like this where I suddenly just realize, like, oh my gosh, I actually no, you're right. That's a huge jump.
Mm-hmm.
um, in my day to day, it doesn't really register because I'm constantly doing something.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly trying to work, you're doing all sorts of different things, and you don't stop and realize sometimes how far you've come. Like 8 years seems like a lot to a lot of people, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like, it was just yesterday that I started all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, no, it is a big jump.
Yeah, I would think so. To go from kind of creating a tech on Geek to now being across social platforms, multiple social platforms. What's your reach like on Twitter? It's a little over 21,000, like approximately.
Yeah.
But you gained a following in a way that I know a lot of content creators would envy, but that's a lot, right?
It is. I think it's one of those things, again, never expected it to grow this much. I don't even know how it grew this much, to be very
Hmm.
honest.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things that because I think I've put so much effort into so many different platforms and have
Hmm.
really cultivated a community,
Hmm.
um, it just becomes, I guess, a natural byproduct of
Hmm.
being a content creator and being active as well. So for me, one of the most important things for me with the people I meet online is I'm here to make friends. And so I take the time to get to know everyone that I'm talking to. I'll reply to them. I'm not just making content and then putting it out there and just leaving it, sort of, you know. Um, when someone interacts with me, I think it's really important to reply and take the time to acknowledge that they've, taken the time to reach out to me or speak to me or engage with what I'm doing. So I think it's almost like a byproduct of that, of
Hmm.
having that sort of strong interaction with people.
So you're involved in a number of different things. I mean, if anybody checks out your work, they'll see you work with representation, Women of Xbox. You've won multiple awards. You're published in lots of places. Simplify it. What do you do? Mhm. That's a weird question, right?
I don't think there is a word to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Even when people ask me now, what are you? What do you do? I say
Mm-hmm.
content creator and diversity advocate, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. I think to put it in very simple terms, I just do what I like doing, and I want to make the world a better place. Um, because my motto in life is I've come into the world, and now, obviously, as I grow older, I'm starting to realize, I guess I'm getting older, and
Mm-hmm.
there's that whole mortality thing that comes into place from time to time. And you realize, all right, well, what can I do with my time here? I want to make the most out of my life. I don't want to just sit around and wait for things to happen. So I'm going to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm constantly thinking about the next generation because I've, recently got a new niece, and I'm at that age now where I'm thinking about families as well and having my own children eventually. And with everything that I've gone through as a person of color, as a woman of color,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, I'd like to leave the world with it being in a better place than when I came into it. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
do some good for the next generation because no one should have to go through obstacles and struggles to do what they love. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's so important that people need to be able to pursue their passions without having unnecessary barriers
Mm-hmm.
and stereotypes that are stopping them from pursuing those passions.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a roundabout way, I'm just here to make sure that people get to have fun with their lives and do it the way I do because I have a lot of fun in my life.
So to me, I'm connecting threads here. You talked about your anti-bullying blog,
Yep.
and then you mentioned, being a woman, a person of color. I imagine you mean that in general, but also like as it pertains to being a content creator, being on camera, that kind of thing. Do the type of rhetoric you would face in that sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always wanted to be on camera and do on camera work. In fact, a very long time ago, I even told my mom I'd love to be an actress because I don't know why. I just wanted to be on camera.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been the kind of thing that people would respond to in a very negative way, where it's like, oh, you don't look like you can be on camera, or, you aren't the right look. I've had a brand even tell me, you're not quite Kiwi, and being a New Zealander, it's like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
New Zealand is multicultural. What do you mean I don't have the right look?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's that kind of thing that has made me realize, and it's why I do what I do for the next generation, because just because I look a certain way doesn't mean I am not a member of the country I'm part of, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm raised in. I'm not part of the culture. I mean, I look and sound just like the next person. The only difference is I might have a different shade to my skin tone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been a big challenge to overcome and have to constantly push back on, really, because I'm more than capable. I just need to be given that opportunity. And yeah, I think the anti bullying blog was maybe my first foray into dealing with all of these bits and pieces, and working in a way that's helping others, like I said, do what they love doing without those obstacles in place, those unnecessary stereotypes and obstacles.
Mm-hmm. It certainly makes sense the way you describe it, and I am, I guess I in awe is a fair way to say that, because I look at, the writing of a website, the writing of the blog, but then anybody that visits MissDeusGeek.com sees what I would argue are very professional headshots or layouts. You seem very comfortable in front of camera, but in all your content that you create, the idea of being an actress does make sense when you say it. So I guess I would say, how did you learn to nail it? As far as the right kind of headshot, because you were on Mixer and streaming, you did podcasts. You had to have learned a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again one of those things that you kind of pick up on the go as you do it. So one of the most important things for me is I'm constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to stop learning, and I'm always looking to improve, which is probably why I've been doing so many different things, because once I learn a particular platform, it's like, okay, let's look to the next one. What can I take from there? What learnings can I take to help me build on this platform? Maybe things that I've learned from the previous platform, et cetera, et cetera. It's always about looking to improve,
Mm-hmm.
because, if you don't stop growing, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I live anyway, and I love to work that way as well. So writing has always come naturally to me. I technically am a lawyer as well, so I am a lawyer in New Zealand, but I've never
Are you
practiced.
kidding?
Oh, no, in another life, I was a lawyer, or I am a lawyer still, technically. I just never practiced. So I have that training in writing various forms, in disseminating information in a way that's going to be impactful to people. And then I obviously also work in marketing. So that's also another added layer that helps with, content creation, but also putting information out there that's going to really be impactful in terms of who is consuming it. So I think that's been really helpful in the way I do my work in this space, because I'm looking at how are people going to consume the content? How are people going to engage with it? It's content that, needs to have an effect on someone.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I'm doing an unboxing, for example, it might look really simple where I'm just using my hands and unboxing, but I'm looking at it from a point of, okay, what's the most effective way someone's going to appreciate what's in the box?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot of thinking, a lot of content planning, a lot of just making sure it is of a standard that I'm comfortable with. And that's how it's all come to be, I suppose.
Hmm. Man, I feel like there's knowledge in there that we didn't reference. Like, did you learn lighting and photography and that kind of thing, camera angles?
Uh, Not really. I mean, not to say I didn't learn. Obviously, I've picked it up as I've done things. So, 5 years ago, maybe
Mhm,
my unboxings then weren't of the same quality and standard as it is now. So I'm
mhm,
constantly improving. But I think when it comes to like lighting, photography, it's what matters to me and what is most aesthetically pleasing to me. So
mhm,
I look at it from an angle, and how I like to visualize something is how I will create that piece of content.
mhm,
um, I'm not the kind of person who goes and looks at other people's content and goes, "Oh, I really like that. I'm going to do it the exact same way." Maybe I'll take inspiration from others,
mhm.
or whatever I've seen online, and then I'll just tweak it to kind of suit me, I suppose. Um, yeah, it's interesting because I don't really sit there and look at like how to utilize a camera. For example, I use my phone. There's no professional DSLR, whatever it's called,
I know what you
camera.
meant.
Yeah. So it's just my phone. Everything that you see is just my phone. So
Interesting.
yeah, I know a lot of people have asked me the question of how I have that kind of overhead shot when I do my unboxings. It's literally just using my ring light and putting the phone in its little socket thing,
Mhm.
and yeah, just using my hands.
Interesting.
So
So, if you have
yeah,
young creators out there, they should not go spend a ton of money on a fresh new camera before they've tried it. They should go with the phone and practice that.
I would say use what you already have, use what's around you, and find inspiration from the little things in your own space, because
Mhm,
that's literally it. I started off having boxes on the floor with with my phone in one hand and trying to unbox with the other, and I realized, okay, that's not going to work. So started using a tripod, realized a tripod wasn't quite the right fit because it was very short and it didn't really have the same sort of impact with the downward kind of, I
angle?
guess, angle. Yeah, there you go. Angle.
Mhm,
Too early in the morning. I'm sorry. My brain's not working. um, yeah, it didn't quite fit. And so, it was a case of trying and testing and realizing, hey, I don't know if you guys have it over there, Kmart.
mhm,
Um, we've got Kmart here, which now sells all of these streamer accessories and
mhm,
products for a very cheap price. So I went and bought a ring light, which came with a really long tripod, and realized, this works.
mhm,
So it's all about trying and just testing and seeing what works without having to spend a lot of money. Because I think a lot of people believe that, when you're a streamer or a content creator, you need the best tech. You don't really.
mhm,
um, for example, I started streaming with my Connect back in the day, and that worked. So you really don't need too much to make good content.
As I would certainly say it did work. You ended up as, one of the first partnered streamers in New Zealand for Mixer, is that right?
Yeah, I think I was the first female. I
Mhm.
think there was a dude who was the first partner, but first female is kind of cool, I guess.
That is kinda cool. That is kinda cool. So, as you create these unboxing videos or other content, is there a different version, say, or technique for putting out content on Twitter versus Instagram or TikTok or anything else? Do you balance or shift between platforms?
um, A little bit, but a lot of times, especially now because I'm working a full-time job and doing so many other things, I can't make different content for each platform. So what I do is I look at making one piece of content that I can then share across every platform. The only difficulty with that is learning that each platform obviously has, um, I guess, different ways that it likes to amplify that piece of content. For example, if I put a portrait video up on Twitter, I've learned that the algorithm doesn't seem to like that as much as a landscape horizontal piece of content.
Hmm.
So, when I'm unboxing, I often have to do it twice, one with a landscape angle and one with a horizontal, I mean, sorry, a vertical angle, portrait
Mm-hmm.
angle for Instagram and TikTok, for example. So it's all about learning what the algorithm likes and then trying to make my content in as little effort as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, typically now that's what I do. I'll just film with two different angles and disseminate it across all the different platforms based on what works for that platform, and that's it, really.
Something that a lot of creators we've had on this show that have been from the 500,000 level of subs down to 200 or whatnot is, and I wrestle with this as well. So I guess I'm asking for advice for me is battling that algorithm game. And for me, it's thumbnails that bother me. Like, do I want an angry face? Do I want a question in the thumbnail or, and I've never quite figured out what is me 100% and also what will appease different algorithms. Is that
Hmm.
something you've had to battle in your career of content?
Fighting the algorithm has always been the hardest thing in the 8 years that I've been making content.
Mhm.
It's always changing. There's no sense to it sometimes. And it's one of those things where it can be so frustrating because you can make the best piece of content and the algorithm will just decide it's not going to show it to people. And it can be very disheartening because you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into it. So, definitely, yeah, I think my biggest obstacle in life has been the algorithm of all these
Mhm.
platforms.
Is it because I agree it's disheartening. It really does hurt when I put my heart and soul into an interview for a game that isn't the most popular, but the creators are passionate, and then it
Mm.
just doesn't curate, it doesn't land, algorithms, this, that. How do you, I guess you would say, battle back, or what's your advice for people that are hitting that stopgap and they feel like they're putting their heart and soul and they're making good content, but it's just not getting picked up?
I think that's where learning a bit of marketing is helpful. So one thing I've learned is to really try to dive deep into what the algorithm enjoys, or rather likes, and what it pushes. So, for example, on Twitter, I've spent so many years on Twitter just looking at what works and what doesn't, looking for other content creators and trying to decide and figure out what it is about their content that the platform really likes and the algorithm pushes. And so you tend to be able to pick out a few things here and there. You might not get it right, but you can figure it out a little bit, I think. And so that's what I've tried to do mostly on Twitter. I'm still trying to figure out TikTok and Instagram, because it's changing all the time. I think I've nailed it on YouTube for my comics channel.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just trying and testing, and as much as it's disheartening, just know that it's not you, it's the platform. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as long as you're putting content out there and it's good content that you are happy with, I think eventually it will start doing well because, consistency is the most important thing at the end of the day. And if you're not posting enough because you're disheartened that, the algorithm isn't going to push your content, you're essentially missing out essentially. Yeah, you're missing out because you're not fighting back, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think consistency is key, trying to figure out what it is that's working, looking at others and seeing what works for them, not necessarily trying to compare yourself with them, but just watching and trying to learn. I think that's the most important thing. You might not get it
Gotcha.
right, but it's one way to
Gotcha.
deal with it.
I really want to get to talk about women of Xbox and such, but you said a couple times, I think in a few different ways, you said you work a full-time job and that you're trying to find, time to put out content efficiently into as many places as possible. And you talked about how it needs to be something that is not going to be super time consuming, but is still of a quality that you are proud of. How much time a, a week now are you putting into content creation versus a few years ago? And how do you find the right balance?
I think I've definitely scaled it a lot further back now, especially over the past few months because I've just started a new job and I was contracting in multiple different places before. So definitely the past year, I've definitely gone way back in terms of the amount of time I'm spending on content. But I think it's also a natural progression potentially because of the evolution of my content. So, for example, at the height of being a content creator, I would say was when I was on Mixer, I was doing, I think, 20 hours a week of streaming,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the the height of Mixer where everything was going so well for it. I was streaming all the time after work. And
Mm-hmm.
then on top of that, posting on social. So it was maybe an hour, 2 hours every day because I would take the time to respond to people. And then it's doing things like clipping and video editing and all of that. So I was probably spending, pretty sure it was a full-time job on top of a full-time job because it felt like I was just, you know, never on break. I was
Gotcha.
constantly go, go, go. But I think in the last few years, I've stopped streaming now because it's just not me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the time to now just make VOD content and doing my social media stuff, it's, I guess I would spend maybe about 10, 15 hours a week here and
Mm-hmm.
there. But then this year, again, content has evolved to a point where I think I spend maybe 5 to 10 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
if at all. Some weeks I just don't make any content because I'm just so busy with other things. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those things where I think you change as you grow older, as things change, as these platforms change. You know, I mean, I spend a lot less time on Twitter/X now because it's
Mm-hmm.
now X and not Twitter. And I,
Yep.
you know, it's very different now as it was back then. So yeah, I mean, I still spend a lot of time on content, but not as much.
Sure. Sure. Now, you are featured in a number of different places at various points in your career: Xbox Wire, Kotaku, CNET, a number of different like news outlets. Uh, why have you been featured? What is it that you've got that is so
It's a good
that's such,
question.
yeah, I don't even know how to word it properly to make it sound right, but it's really cool. So how what is it that they're talking to you about so often?
A lot of the time it's about being a female content creator, being a woman in games,
Hmm.
especially because even in today's world, a lot of people still believe games are typically for boys and men, and it's a very male dominated activity. So
Yeah.
a lot of these publications have interviewed me about being a woman who's been in games and someone who's been in it for a long time. And, you know, I guess with the work that I do in terms of diversity and representation, it's a lot of discussions around why that's important and why I do what I do and how I've come to this point in my, I guess, 8 years of being a content creator and being in the industry. So I think that's goes to show that, you know, there is a lot of change that's happening, a lot of talk and discussions around why games are really for everyone. It's not just a male dominated hobby anymore because a lot of girls play games as well. So I think that's the magic factor, I suppose.
Gotcha. It's something that I feel like a lot of people note and take note of is the lack of women in representation in gaming for basically outside of the white male demographic in general, because the industry was so heavily dominated by that. I am fortunate that I get to interview a lot of developers from around the world, from all different backgrounds, but even within that, quite a few of them are men as well.
Mm.
Have you seen an improvement of representation for women in gaming, either on the content creation side or the developer side or even the journalism side?
Definitely. I think that's the beauty of this day and age is that there are, you know, I think there was a report recently or over the last couple of years that almost 48% or 47, 48% of gamers are female,
Mm-hmm.
which is almost half. So, you know, it's literally half the population are playing games and they're
Mm-hmm.
women
Mm-hmm.
or you know whatever gender identity they choose to identify with. But you know it's not just white males anymore, and it may never have been just white males because you know even from the time I was a kid, my uncles in Malaysia were playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, granted they were male, but you know what I mean? It's
Still.
not just it's not just the Western world that was playing video games, the whole
Hmm.
world. So many different people are playing games, making games. And I think it's so amazing to see a lot more diversity when it comes to these developers who are making games. And I think that's the most important part of representation is you're seeing such a diverse range of people behind these games making content, and it's allowing the next generation to kind of see, oh, like I see myself in that person, and so it must be fine for me to want to pursue this. And I think that's the most impactful thing about representation.
I'm inclined to agree on a number of levels. Both as a gamer, I see a lot more protagonists that are they represent more minorities or cultures, not just male and female, but from all places around the world. And as far as the gamer side of it, because I'm a teacher, I get to see these adolescent kids. And when I started teaching a long time ago, 14, 15 years ago, it was mostly my boys, and now it's particularly post COVID, it's all of them, every one of them.
Mm.
And I'll share a cool anecdote. 2 days ago, we just started our new school year, and I have a new student who was not at our school last year. She picked up my women in gaming book because I keep a lot of women in gaming and gaming books in my classroom. She picked it up and she was so stoked about it. She was so stoked that I knew some of the writers for Black Panther, and the Avengers content, and she just started talking to me and talking about game development and how to make games and writers of games. It was the coolest thing in the world. The coolest
it's
thing in the
it's
world.
so cool, isn't it? Like I met a few girls like that as well, and it just blows you away how passionate they are about it, and just how knowledgeable they are at such a young age. And that's the thing that I do now. So the work that I do with Women of Xbox and all the different bits and pieces that I am part of, it's to try and foster that enthusiasm and to make sure it's cultivated in a right way and a healthy way, so that they can pursue these really really passionate hobbies that they have and make it into a career if that's what they want to pursue. And I think that's the most, for me anyway, it's the most beautiful thing to see is when a young person just comes to you and it's like, I love this so much, and this is everything I know, and I'm so passionate about it. And you just can't help but smile when you see
Mm-hmm.
that and you get to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the most important thing that I take away from everything I do, even with my content creation, is when one person just comes to me and is like, your unboxings are so cool. And I'm just like, thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
how can I help you do something like that so that I can come and go, your content is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think there's just such beauty and kindness and love when you get to experience that with different people, whether it's young people, people your age, older people as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what gaming is meant to be about at the end of the day. It's meant to be bringing people together and everyone just having this like super exuberant passion that they can
Mm-hmm.
share with one another. And unfortunately, there are a lot of spaces where that doesn't happen. And I think that's you know, such a shame.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, but I do notice, at least in my very limited window into socials, because I do a lot of curating of my own timeline, so I'm not exposed to it. But I see
Mm.
people pushing back,
Yeah.
which is helpful. Whether it's
Mm.
you know in Starfield, somebody's upset about being having to choose a pronoun, which just makes the experience more accessible for them or whoever else. Whatever it is, I feel like there's a lot of pushback, and as the pendulum swings, I think people settle on a happier place. Um,
Mm.
you mentioned your work with Women of Xbox. I wonder if we couldn't touch on that before we let you go. Can you tell
Yeah, of
me what it
course.
is you do with Women of Xbox?
So currently, I am just the overseer of everything. So
Mm-hmm.
almost like typical executive or sorts who just creates something and goes, all right, it's in a beautiful place where I can just let it run by itself and I'll sit back and just make sure everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, I set it up to be a community where women who play games on Xbox can come together and just meet each other, support one another, have a safe place where they can just be themselves. And I think it sort of happened as almost as a result of a lot of conversations women were having about how difficult it is to be part of communities where they don't feel comfortable because maybe there are some men in there who aren't appreciative of female gamers, or they've been playing games online and being harassed by people that they're playing games with. So Women of Xbox was more about bringing these women together so that they can enjoy playing games without having to worry about you know having a voice changer or
Hmm.
turning off party chat, things like that. Sorry. And also, really trying to help cultivate their passion.
Hmm.
So having, regular discussions, um, having, just sharing passions. Really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's just a community of people who can share their passions with one another and really help and support one another. So, for example, we have a community member who's really passionate about taking unique photographs of the Xbox controllers, and so, we'll see it posted all the time, and we're just hyping her up. And often she can feel very unsure about her worth in the content creation space. And I think it's really helpful when we all kind of come together and it's like, oh my God, your photos are amazing. You really need to feel proud about the work you're doing because it is amazing. And I think that's essentially what we all do really at the end of the
Hmm.
day now, and
Yeah.
especially is just we just hype each other up. That's what we do.
Hmm.
I've obviously taken a step back a bit recently because so you get to hear this first, but Women of Xbox is evolving to become something else. So I've been working on a project that will be
Hmm.
launching next month, and it's a bit of an evolution once again of all my content and my work in this space. And I'm taking a little bit of Attack on Geek, a little bit of Women of Xbox, a little bit of what I've been doing in the diversity space, and creating something new, which hopefully will help the younger generation, especially, and aspiring professionals in the industry.
It's funny. My next question was going to be like, okay, what's the next step? Because if I look at your history, like you got the Game Her Awards in 2021. You were been in Xbox MVP 2 years running, Xbox Hall of Fame, ambassadors. You were in different equality in games lists from 2018 and 19, and that's a lot of pressure. And yet, it sounds like you're continuing that work with whatever Women of Xbox is morphing into.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's for me, it's never been about these awards and these accolades. I think it's just been a byproduct, a very nice byproduct of
Hmm.
everything that I've done. But I think, the pressure isn't there anymore because it's never been like the end goal. It's never been about getting awards or getting recognized or anything like that. It's all about, like I said earlier, just having fun and doing what I enjoy.
Hmm.
But now it's more about, it's less about me having fun and more about cultivating that for others to have fun. And I
Hmm.
think that's where, it's kind of become a thing of like, if it does well, great. If I get recognized for it, great. But at the end of the day, now I've kind of evolved as a person as well, where I'm not keen to play every single game that comes out. I'm very particular now with the games I want to play and the content I want to make, which is why I don't stream anymore, for example. And so with that comes the next stage, which is how can I take the last 8 years and everything I've learned and now help everyone who wants to be in this space? So, content creators, people who want to work in games, people who want to work in pop culture as well, because my previous role was working in anime, for example. So it's kind of that nice happy evolution of not only my content and my work, but me as a person as well.
Hmm.
So
That's
yeah.
a brilliant answer. Goodness. So, as our closeout here, you have a moment to just speak to the young content creator who's not sure if they believe in themselves, or they're not sure if they want to make content, or they're struggling with views. What do you say to them?
Well, I felt all of that. So I think it's really important to know that it's completely healthy to feel all of those feelings, being disheartened, feeling like you should just give it all up and quit, feeling like no one else cares about what you do, and then realizing, actually, I like doing this work. I like doing it. So look into yourself. I think that's really important. Do you like doing it? Does it bring you joy? And if it doesn't, that's okay. Something else will come along. But if you do, keep at it. And I think that's how I've managed to sustain everything I've done for the past 8 years is every day checking in with myself. Do I like doing this? I do. So I'm going to keep doing it. I don't I don't need anyone else to like what I do. When I make content, I put it out there. No one sees it. That's okay. Tomorrow I'll make a piece of content. It's probably going to go bonkers. So I think to all these young people who are struggling, who are unsure, who are seeing, lack of views and all of that, that's today. Tomorrow's another story. So keep doing it. As long as you're enjoying it and you're not harming anyone in the process and there's no barrier to stop you from doing it, which there shouldn't, keep going. And I think, it'll all happen in time.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Diana, I'm so appreciative of your time today.
Well,
I
thank you for
appreciate
having
you.
me.
Oh, goodness gracious. It was an absolute pleasure and a joy, something I've wanted for a long time. Would you let people know where to find you on socials?
Sure. I am literally just MissDeusGeek everywhere. Everywhere
There,
you can think of, I'm there.
there you go. Listeners, once again, we appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting XEP. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care.